People's Progressive Party, as General Secretary of the party, congratulate all Guyanese, especially our Afro-Guyanese brothers and sisters, on this very special day. I think the day gives us an opportunity, apart from the showcasing of the rich culture that was brought from Africa to our homeland, to reflect on the great contribution that Guyanese of African descent have made to our country and to our development. And we're so integrated that I believe something I've said before. 15 years ago, I made a speech, and I said that we have a tendency to see these celebrations of our ancestry and our culture separately. But as Guyanese, we have to start owning all that belong to us. And that's why I congratulated all Guyanese on Emancipation Day. My history, I said at that time, as a son of this country, my history did not start when the first ship bringing people from India landed in Guyana. My history is the history of Guyana. And so too, I'd like all Guyanese to see and believe that our entire history, the good parts and the bad parts, belong to all of us. It doesn't start only when your ancestors came here. It's all of it belongs to all of us. And it can only make us stronger if we understand and celebrate all of this. And so this is why sometimes we have to reach out and do much more, and politicians especially have to promote that atmosphere where these activities that celebrate our culture bring people together rather than divide them. Now, I'm sure that every person in this room and across the country living in Guyana would have had someone of a different race or someone from a different ancestry play a very meaningful part in their lives. For me personally, and I've spoken about this before, I don't think I'd be where I am today had it not been for a special teacher in my life, Audrey Payne from Buxton. A combination of the tough love that she gave and the confidence she had in me led me to be where I am today. And I have no doubt about that. Had it not been for her coming through the mud dam down to my home and talking to my parents about what I should do and what I should study, I have no doubt that where I'd be today, and it'd probably be a very different path. And therefore, it's not a unique thing. It's not a unique thing to me. I think across the board, people would have had similar experiences where people of different races played a great part in their lives. And therefore, I think that we must not use the activities to divide people. Now, I've seen some public comments from the opposition and from some other organizations about many new celebrations across our country and about the government supporting them. And this is portrayed in the public domain as an attempt to divide. This is not an attempt to divide. We support a full expression and a decentralized expression and a broad-based expression of our culture, particularly on this special day. ACDA has done a wonderful job historically in arranging these activities at the national park. And we've always financially supported that activity and morally supported it. Even when I was president, and they would not allow me to even bring greetings to the people who attended, I still attended the activities at the park. And we still supported financially. And tomorrow you're going to see the government officials go to the park, and we continue to support ACDA, and they will be there. But there would be other celebrations too around the country, and government officials will go there too. Because we believe that wherever people take their own initiatives, we should be supporting them. And so it's not to undermine ACDA or the activities at the park. In fact, I hope that thousands of Guyanese will go there of every race to the activities at the park. It's a very important day for us, and I hope that they would all do this. And I'd hope that for one day, at least they would stop trying to be divisive on this matter. Many times, these activities, if they're political, they make our supporters uncomfortable. There are lots of PPP members and supporters who are Afro-Guyanese, who are card-bearing members of this party, and also biracial or multi-ethnic, mixed people of mixed origin. And they go to the activities, and when the activities become political, they feel, because it's their party that you're speaking against, and they feel uncomfortable. And sometimes they want to do their own thing, and we have to say, no, we have to keep at this, because we have to change this. You can't blame them, and there are thousands of members of the party who are Afro-Guyanese, and they're proud of their heritage. They're really proud of their heritage. They just don't want it to be political on that day. So I hope that we'll stop at least this one day, and for similar kinds of activities, and try to promote that which belongs to all of us, not just people of African descent, belongs to all of us as Guyanese, because we have Guyanese blood running through our veins. Tomorrow, Friday, I think, would be the 4th anniversary of the government in office. Elections were held on March 2nd, 2020, but we had to wait 5 months. I think we made the Guinness Book of World Record for the declaration of results of the elections. And it took place 5 months later after what took place. And President Ali was sworn in on the 2nd of August. And given what has happened in Venezuela, and the close parallel to what we see here in Georgetown, it would be crucial to reflect on democracy, especially now that the trial has started for those who the Commission of Inquiry found culpable of trying to steal elections in favor of the AFC and APNU. And so I hope that you are following the trial carefully as a country. We have waited for a long time to get to this stage. The defense lawyers for the people who've been charged have tried all sorts of delaying tactics, and they've succeeded thus far to have the matter not heard. The last attempt was dismissed by the Chief Justice, and the trial has started. And you will see a similar pattern now, and the frustration expressed by the prosecution that in fact, on numerous occasions, uncalled for, that the defense lawyers are again trying to stall the trial by making frivolous objections, and often these objections are entertained. And they're entertained although they depart, although they are not a normal part of courtroom procedures. So I have no doubt, the way this is going, that this matter will end up at the CCJ, ultimately. And therefore, it is crucial that the records be in the public domain if they're not going to be kept in the court, so that what is presented and the testimonies of the witnesses will be available in the media and elsewhere, so that when ultimately it gets to the CCJ, that the full picture of the testimony, discounting all of the objections and the suppression of the evidence, that would be available to the judges. And that there'd be no doubt as to what was presented, the fullness of the case. And it's a robust case. So it's incumbent on the media to report almost verbatim, and we hope that that will be done, about what's going on in the courtroom, so there'd be no doubt in the future as to what was testified to. Secondly, we believe that, and we intend to invite the international community, the diplomatic presence here, given their high interest in this matter, when in 2020 and subsequently, and they're urging that people who try to subvert, public officials who try to undermine and subvert democracy and the will of the people, must face prosecution. That now we're at a stage we'd invite them to observe the court drama that's taking place. And it's crucial that we pursue this pathway, if for only one reason: to ensure that people don't act, or public officers do not act with impunity in the future, where they're vested with either a responsibility by law or the Constitution, and they, in this case, in a partial manner, discharge that responsibility, and in a corrupt manner. And therefore, it's crucial that we have the international community looking at it. I do not want to get bogged down on this matter when speaking about the 4 years that we've been in office. And I do not want to use today again to rehash all that we have done, because it will take hours to do that. Just to say that we came into office in the middle of a global pandemic with the country practically shut down. Tens of thousands of people without jobs, who had lost jobs under APNU and who had lost jobs because of the shutdown and COVID, where there was no capacity to even do basic testing for COVID, 40 tests per day. There was no hospital to address it. And within a short period, we built up that capacity. We got the vaccines. People were opposed to us buying these vaccines. You got the opposition opposed to that. We got people vaccinated. We got the hospitals up and running. We put oxygen in them, in the hospitals, and beds. There were no beds in them, particularly the one at Lilendal. And we managed to keep our people relatively safe. We had tragic loss of lives, but when you look at our experience compared to many developed countries in the world, you would see we fared much better than they did because of the way we approached it. We also shunned the approach that called for a total shutdown of the country, and we started in a very careful manner to partially reopen the country, which we did successfully, and we put people back to work. Those who had lost jobs because of COVID, and then who had lost jobs because of the APNU's policies of high taxation and sending people home, basically, like the 7,000 sugar workers. So the first 2 years of our tenure, the 4 years, was spent on keeping the people of this country safe. And sometimes that's forgotten, what we came in and we found. Because now when you look at where Guyana is, and it's roaring, it's growing at a rapid pace, you see a level of dynamism that's unmatched anywhere in the world. In our economy, you couldn't believe that 2 years, just 2 short years back, we were in a situation where we didn't know what would happen around the world or in this country. And to consider where we are and the changes in our country since then. And to give you a few examples of addressing that, but also keeping faithful to the promises we made to the people of this country. We outlined a set of promises in our manifesto that we said, if elected, we will do, and we have done over 90% of them. And you can do a fact check on this. Contrast that with APNU in 2015. They did not accomplish 10% of what they promised the people in 2015. That is why nobody trusts them to do anything that they say, because they had an opportunity and they failed the people of this country. In fact, they did the exact opposite of what they promised. They said their tax rates were too high in Guyana, and then they increased taxes, that they will change that. They promised to help our children, they took away their grant. They took away the subsidy, water subsidy from pensioners. I can go down the long list. We lost jobs. They used to talk about, oh, not enough people had jobs in 2015. Well, we lost jobs, about 35 to 40,000 jobs in the 5 years. And some of it because of higher taxation, but some of it because of direct policies. They just send people home, 7,000 people in the sugar industry alone. So we reversed that. Today, we have about 50 to 60,000 new people working outside of those who got back their job from COVID. That's an achievement now. 2, we have increased disposable income in the public sector alone by $90 billion. $90 billion. 3, we have already done 33,000 on the course to 40,000 house lots by the end of this year. On the APNU, they did probably a measly 1,000, and this is just after the no confidence motion. That is it. We have 50,000 people who have studied or are studying on government-paid scholarships already. We've restored, we nearly double old age pension. We've restored the children's grant. You remember, you saw last week I dealt with Nigel Hughes wants us to pass a law to give our people 35,000 Guyana dollars a year in oil money. 35,000 Guyana dollars per year. Everyone should get that. That's his law. I calculated it. You saw how it last week. Now our school kids alone are getting $50,000 per year. He wants to give everybody 35,000 Guyana dollars per year. So we have laid out an infrastructure plan that's unprecedented. I dealt with that. 140 kilometers of 4-lane roads awarded and under construction. 400 odd bridges, excluding the big ones, the one at Linden and here across to Region 3, the Demerara Harbor Bridge. We have, and outside of that, through our incentive regimes, we've stimulated a whole new range of non-oil investments. We quickly came into office, we put out an ad. We had about 20-something expressions of interest, almost in the first weeks of coming to office, 4 weeks after we came into office, in the middle of COVID, when people did not want to go anywhere. In August, the country was shut down. 4 weeks after that, we tabled a budget. I was told that by the Ministry of Finance staff that it would take 6 months to prepare a budget. That's the routine from the time they send out the circular. We did it in 4 weeks. And we had to prepare a budget that covered a period, deal with. Remember, the last budget was passed in November 2018. They had no budget in 2019 and no budget in 2020 because those 2 years, they just hung on to power because after the no confidence motion. So we had to prepare a budget to cover that entire period in the past, as well as a budget for the rest of the year. And we did it. And we reversed so many of the taxes that we have promised. Nearly $40 billion of taxes, including on electricity and water and all of those issues. And we also, in those budgets, did a number of things. We removed the corporate tax on education and healthcare, which has seen unprecedented private investments in those sectors. But we also met with the people who are interested in the hospitality sector in building hotels. In the first few weeks after an expression of interest, we had over 20 of them. And we sat at State House, the president, myself, etc. And we said, here would be the new incentive regime, a tax holiday for the hotels, because these represented massive investments. And we will work with you to try to find the land to build the hotels. And because of that policy, we got 7 new international hotels now under construction that would start working next year, that would employ some 3,000 Guyanese. And this was in the middle of COVID. We were working with people with masks on, trying to move the country forward. And because of that level of involvement, we got 7 new international hotels. In the 5 years under APNU, nothing, not a single new major hotel. Nothing of that sort. And 7 are now under construction to start operating next year. And there are about 2 or 3 more that will come on stream. Healthcare, unprecedented levels. We've laid out a plan, put together the 12 new hospitals, had the feasibility studies done, the design work has practically been completed for all of them, and many of them are under construction. This is in the short period that we've been in office, the last 2 years basically, because as I said before, the first 2 years you couldn't do much work because of COVID. You had to do a lot of conceptualization work. More community infrastructure has been built than ever before. The roads to people's homes in the city, a whole range of other facilities. So today is we are a very different place than we were 4 years ago when the PPP took office. In spite of all the challenges that we've had, in spite of all the challenges. A lesser party, a less experienced party, would have folded up in that period. Like how APNU panicked and just shut down the country. That was their thing, shut down the country. They had no plan, and I'll deal with that a little bit later. So this is, I'm very pleased about these 4 years, and a lot that we have worked on in the past 4 years putting together will yield the benefits in the future. So they're not immediate, the benefits don't come immediately. Now the construction is going on, so we had more jobs for people, but when these 7 hotels are running, 3,000 Guyanese will be working there. That's 3,000 more jobs for our people, and good paying jobs. When the gas to energy project is completed next year, we will become an exporter of cooking gas. Now we import all our cooking gas. The price will plummet. The cost of electricity will become more stable, and the price will be cut by 50%, the price of electricity, so that people's electricity bill would go down. And we're working on that. The benefits have not come fully as yet. Our program to build the canals that I spoke of last week, the Hope Light canals, would bring hundreds of thousands of acres of arable land under better drainage conditions, so that we can increase production and productivity in these areas, apart from the impact it would have in preventing flooding across our country. And those are still in the works. The benefits have not been felt as yet, because we think long term. It's not only immediate things. So a lot of the improvements are yet to be seen. When the 12 hospitals are completed, we'd have 30 new operating theaters across this country. We'd have maybe about 30 in the public sector, about 30 CT scans now in almost all these hospitals. We will move primary health care up to a different level, and they're unfolding now. They're under construction now for the benefits in the future. So in another 2-3 years, our people will see this benefit. So we didn't only think, oh, let's, like I saw it, they said short-termism, let's just do the handouts, a couple of handouts, only increase wages and salaries, which we have done in the public sector. But we want our people to have better health care. We want them to have better education. We want them to have a better living condition. You know, the opposition says we spend too much money on infrastructure. And up to a couple of days ago, I met some people from the East Coast, and they said we spent nearly 3 hours on the road getting into Georgetown because of traffic jam. That's 3 hours of their lives wasted. There are about 4 persons in the car. And they don't want us to build a 4-lane road from Mahaika to Georgetown. They don't want to build a 4-lane road, but well, we're building it. It's already awarded, but they're opposed to that. So I guess these 4 years have been tough. I didn't even talk about our achievements on the environment front. We have moved from zero to a world-leading strategy that has earned more money than any country in the world in the forested sector through a market-based mechanism. In the world, number one. And it's as simple as that. That's the example there. We have, on the oil and gas sector, we've taken a contract. You recall what we had. People sometimes don't remember that. You had this government called APNU AFC that got Exxon to draft the cabinet memorandum. The cabinet memorandum that went to the cabinet to approve the 2016 contract. So they negotiated an agreement with Exxon. The government is supposed to draft its own memorandum to go for approval. Exxon drafted the memorandum for them that they took to the cabinet. Trotman took to the cabinet to get the approval of the contract with Exxon. That came out in the report, the Clyde and Company report, that they themselves commissioned towards the end because they wanted to commission a study to say that nothing illegal was done. Imagine what sort of government we had, where the oil company drafted the cabinet memo for the 2016 agreement, the one that everybody now talks about what the PPP is doing. That's what they did. And they hid it. And they hid the agreement until it came out. And they hid the signing bonus. And now they talk about transparency. What have we done in 4 years? We have passed a local content law where $700 million US of business go to our people. Nearly 1,500, 1,600 Guyanese companies. More of our people by law now have to be hired by these oil and gas companies. That's what is a requirement of the law, the Local Content Act. We have made transparent the NRF. We have passed a new petroleum activities bill, expanding our development scope. We have gone to auction. We've done a new PSA. We've strengthened the environmental permit. We've strengthened the licensing regime. All of these have been done in this period too. So, as I said before, if I were to chronicle all that happened in every sector, it will take me days to speak here about them. Because I can go down by regions, I can go down by sectors, and you can see all the improvements in these areas. So I would hope that people will pay attention to the achievements, because the other side wants you to, and I'm going to come to that, what they want you to focus on. So I notice that some of the opposition members and their sycophants, they cannot believe that an impartial investigation into allegations of police corruption can be done by SOCO. And I was trying to think, why is this so? So I came up with this, that the PNC and AFC, but particularly the PNC because of its history, they have had this habit, in fact, a whole long history of interfering with constitutional bodies, subverting their professionalism, subverting the professionalism of the institutions of state throughout their entire history from its formation. So it has become a habit to them. And they can't believe that the institutions can act professionally. Because when people have a habit of subverting institutions, they think that their opponents will want to do the same thing. And what do I mean by subverting institutions? The PNC has a history of using the Elections Commission to rig elections. In the whole period between until 1992, that is what happened. Between maybe the late 60s, the 70s, and 1992. They used the Elections Commission to steal elections. This has been well documented by the BBC. They did several documentaries as to how they did it, with overseas voting, fictitious names, stuffing the ballot boxes. People used to find wads of ballots with a rubber band in the box when they opened the boxes, found boxes that were replaced and thrown in the trenches when the army came in and collected the boxes. So they have a history of subverting GCOM, an independent institution. The last elections, they tried again. Secondly, the institution of the army. The army, under the law, must protect this state and must always act lawfully. The PNC subverted the army. They put in a lot of political people through the YSM at that time into the army. They used the army to steal elections, and that's documented too. So they subverted the professionalism of the army. The army departed from what its constitutional duties were when they went and collected the ballot boxes. I saw that myself as a young boy in the village, where at 6 o'clock the army would come, surround the village, and take the boxes away. And then you hear in my village, which is a pro-PPP village, 90% of us voted for the PNC. and that happened. The judiciary, they subverted that too. There was a time when the PNC flag flew over the High Court of Ghana, not the national flag. It was an era of party paramountcy. Imagine the party flag. It's like the PPP flag flying over the court. There was an era like that. They have some iconic pictures of that happening. So they subverted GCOM, they subverted the judiciary, they subverted the army. Look at Soku in the last government. Reported directly to Ramjatan and the others, and only went after the political opponents. Soku was established by the PPP to be an investigative arm of the FIU. When the FIU came up with acts of money laundering and suspicious transactions, Soku was supposed to go after them. People, not to go after your political opponents. Soku went after every single PPP person you can think of. Roger Luncheon, Samuel Hines, I think Ramatar, myself, Irfan Ali, Anin Andalal, everyone, Frank Anthony, Priyam Manik, every single person you can think about in the last government. That was subversion of these institutions. So I now understand why APNU and their sycophants can't imagine that a government agency could have an impartial investigation and not be, that investigation not be subverted or interfered with by the politicians. Because they have a habit of doing this. And so you can't, if you suck an egg, you would think, like a dog that sucks an egg, you think that every other dog sucks egg. This is the usual stuff. Next thing they're going to say, I call them dogs. So I'm just giving it as an example. They always, that would be their next thing for the whole week. Cussing Jagdeo, call them dogs. They're not dogs, they're wonderful people, but they just like to steal elections and subvert institutions. So, this is something that we have. Look at the ERC. The ERC was set up because we wanted a body to investigate claims of discrimination outside of the executive that had powers to basically direct the executive. How many cases are filed about discrimination at the ERC? Very few. But they would go abroad to try to make a case that we're discriminating against people and go and complain to others. So let me just say that Soku will do a professional job regardless of who has committed any illegal act. And they're already demonstrating that they have the full authority to do so. Anyone implicated in any financial impropriety or any illegal act could be questioned by Soku, regardless of how far up the power chain it goes. Particularly in the matter before Soku now. The investigations would be completed and the results would be known to the public. So I saw a Starbuck News editorial saying that President Ali must speak on this matter because there is somehow a meltdown in the police and in the army, because we have this case that's being investigated by Soku that involves some people in the senior leadership of the police force, and there have been a series of intelligence-led arrests made by soldiers who have been apprehended, caught with marijuana, and who are now charged for that offense. And they say, oh, this is a meltdown. This is not a meltdown. This is a serious attempt by this government not to sweep anything under the carpet. Do you think under APNU people were not doing illegal activities in these agencies? A few weeks ago, I reported that Mr. Granger said, President Granger, that he wanted police, a number of people in the senior leadership of the police who were unbribable. A person that he appointed, the senior leadership, was charged, sent home, and then nobody wanted to talk about it. One of the deputy commissioners. And then the police commissioner said, oh, we did an investigation into allegations of corruption by the police, I think it was the Police Complaints Authority or the Office for Responsibility, one of these agencies, and the person is cleared. No serious investigation. So that was the situation at that time. They caught people also with, in fact, a captain in 2019 was caught with a large quantity of marijuana. They had a $1 billion scam for which a number of people have been charged between Guyal and the GDF that took place under the APNU. A $1 billion scam where they were collecting fuel illegally and selling the fuel. $1 billion. People forget about that under APNU. When we came into office, we did an audit, and we found a number of people were charged for it, and it's before the court. What do you have to say about that? That wasn't a meltdown. That was a cover-up. It didn't come out in the public domain. 5 years of cover-up. We're determined not to let that happen again. We're determined. And so it doesn't matter if we catch the soldiers, if they commit an illegal act, or so, whether they're soldiers or citizens or policemen, they have to face the law. And the leadership of the Army, they've made it clear. The leadership of the Army, in a public statement, have made it clear that it's intelligence-led operation. They're taking it seriously. This is not by chance. They're doing this, the police and the Army are doing this through intelligence-led operations to apprehend these people. We should be applauded for not covering this up. This is not a meltdown. This is showing that the state can work if, or the institutions of the state are working. If they're catching a soldier or a policeman who might be involved in a corrupt act and he gets charged and placed before the court, that is the institution working. You think in the United States this doesn't happen? You don't have corrupt policemen and corrupt people in those agencies, or many parts of the world. Or under APNU, the 5 years old, everyone was pristine. We just saw an example of it. A $1 billion cover-up, fuel cover-up. And it's a pity that they charge only the small people. Because you remember the infamous message from Winston Jordan. I don't want to mention it publicly because it has some obscenities involved. But you go back and see the linkage there to Winston Jordan. So you remember how some members of the PSC, the Police Service Commission, were paid tens of millions of dollars to draft standing orders for the police. Whilst they were members of the commission, that orders that were already drafted, they were then paid large sums of money to draft these orders. And they were members of the Police Service Commission. That was a clear conflict of interest. That should have never happened, but it took place under APNU. It took place under APNU. And it went unnoticed until it was exposed by us when we got into office. So that was a cover-up, and this is not a meltdown. This is the institutions working. We can't promise that every soldier or every policeman will act in a manner that is professional. But there are thousands of them who act professionally. Thousands of soldiers and policemen who would give their lives for this country and also act professionally. And we must not disparage all of them. We must not do that. And the ones who are acting illegally, they're being caught by the institutions through their own efforts, the institutions' own efforts to ensure that these bodies meet the professional standards. Many people thought that there wouldn't have been a Soku investigation of Brutus because he's so high in the police force. But it's happening now, and you see how it's unfolding. That they're leaving no stone unturned to get to the truth. So we don't have to be on the defensive on these matters. And the agencies have made this very clear. So for somebody who said, oh, it's a meltdown, it's not no meltdown. It is our own efforts to, as I said a few weeks back, let the chips fall where they may. I said this, and this goes right across the country. For the contractors and everyone else, for the people who owe NIS, and I can say to the people in Region 2, now on Region 3, that all of the thousands of people who were security guards in those two regions, maybe combined nearly 1,700 persons who have not had their NIS paid for 3 years, that they are now fully paid for the past 3 years and over $130-something million by the two companies. And now there are some other companies that we're targeting now, and I made it clear that if they don't pay all of the outstanding NIS, they're going to lose their government contracts, and also they're going to be handed over to the police. So we're not skimping on this effort to tackle all of these things. People can do well in this country. They can do extremely well. They don't have to act in that illegal manner or a greedy manner. A lot of these people, I said it, made it clear. Some of them drive fancy vehicles, etc., and would not pay the NIS for the poor guy who's working and can't get medical care when they need it. So this is not going to find favor in this administration. We've been busy at many other things, but we are now honing in on these issues now to see that the system works and people are treated fairly. So this brings me to the press conferences that I don't get to respond to, the APNU and the AFC that they do on Thursdays. So these are like worn, lame, mediocre, uninformed press conferences. It's like I need energy to even respond to them. Like even my coffee, the shots of coffee that I get here don't even give me energy. They just sap me like with stupidity. And it's so transparent to everyone. So Patterson, emerge in his new role as the crusader for morality. And given his track record, it's like a sinner trying to pope the entrance into heaven. So this is like, so his biggest thing now is that the gas to energy project would be delayed and the designs are flawed. A figment of his imagination. You know what they want? They want this to happen. So they don't want the gas to energy project that we work hard on bringing to this stage. You recall, they had an opportunity since 2016 to go with this project. They didn't do anything whatsoever up to 2020, except buy up some land in parts of the country where they thought the pipeline would land. So some of the top officials in the PNC, they bought some lands on the East Coast. In my area, they thought the pipeline would go there. Well, we didn't take the pipeline there. We took it to Wales. We did a study. We looked at Berbice by New Amsterdam, and it was almost the equal distance from the FPSO to New Amsterdam like it is to Wales. Wales is a little bit longer. But there in New Amsterdam, it was a soggy area, and you would have had to do much more work because it's by the seaside in the north of the bridge. And we decided to go here at Wales because they had closed their estate, given away the land, and sold out the property. They sold out all the factory, the metal, corruptly sold it out. All the big machines, scrap metal. They sold out the houses, the housing units to people who were close to them. They gave out their land, everything. That's what happened. They just dismantled. They have a history of dismantling things, not building things. They found an estate that was going well, 1,700 people employed there, another 800 in Canal who were supplying cane to that factory. People of every race working there from that was a mixed area. Shut it down, give away the land that we have to now take back for housing because we need land to do 14,000 house lots over the river there because of the high demand in that region too. We have to take back the lands now from a lot of the people, giving away the housing units, and sold out the factory of scrap metal. That was what they left there, 1,700 people. Many of them didn't receive their severance. You recall the people from Wales come in to protest in front of Parliament for their severance, which they should have gotten by law. We gave them an additional $250,000 when we got into office on top of their severance. And we said, what are we going to do to generate jobs in this area? So we said, the gas to energy project can go in this area to employ people and then the surrounding industries. The other option was bringing it into Demerara, but the lands are too valuable and it's too close to the city. So we took it there, a study to examine, we took it there. We went and we look at the cost of what it would take when you make all the capital investments, the pipeline, the power plant, the NGL facility, the transmission main, and the control center. How much we'd have to spend and what it will cost us to pay back for this, how much it will cost us to generate power at cents per kilowatt hour. And it came up to about 4 cents per kilowatt hour. And a lot of this can be financed from the liquids that we would sell. So the energy could practically be nearly free because we're getting the gas for free. That's the economics of the project. Simply put, in a nutshell, you don't need a degree to understand that. You don't need a degree to understand that. It's simple. We're generating power the cost of about 4 cents per kilowatt hour. And all of the spending that we have, we'll be able to pay back nearly from the sale of the liquids, and just a little bit more. So the project comes in practically for free. That would allow us to cut the price for 50 cents. So that's going on. A lot of studies, a lot of work, hard work, contract. It's a complex project, multiple areas. APNU would have been incapable. We wouldn't have gotten this far. So now we got it on. They started. The pipeline is coming in. It would land by the end of the year. The sites, the transformers came in. The control center is built. Guess what their preoccupation is now? Oh, it will not come in 2025, as the government said. It will come in 2026. Not that they had nothing, no alternative. We wouldn't have had no power at all under them. They didn't do anything. But they're quibbling now about which year it will come in. We still believe it will come in 2025. They're worried it comes in before the elections. That's what I think they're worried about, and the prices get cut. But we don't need that to win the elections, because people see what you're working. You have a dodo party there with no plans, and nobody believes you in any case, because you have a track record of not fulfilling your promise. We don't need that. But their big hope, their hope is that it doesn't come in 2025. So even if it comes in 2026, the people of this country would have 300 megawatts of power installed, reliable power, cheaper power by 50%, and cheap cooking gas. That is from that project, conceptualized and implemented by the People's Progressive Party and commented on by APNU. That's what an AFC. They comment on things. They can't do any of this. They have a lot of words to say, and they try to sound erudite. They come with some, something that they pick up somewhere and they read it up at a press conference. It's all nonsense. For people who are familiar with the project, they know it's nonsense, utter nonsense. So that's what they're concerned about. They then went to the bridge and said that bridge will come in 2026 too, not 2025. And so I'm thinking, we got this feasibility study. We put together, they're building the bridge. It's a massive structure. As you would see, nearly 3 kilometers long bridge, 4-lane bridge. And I'm going back to Patterson, and I'm thinking, Patterson was going to do a 3-lane bridge that would have opened and would have had a bend across the river to land on some properties that Mr. Ming owns across the river. But he didn't get past the feasibility study. He is charged now in court for tampering with the feasibility study. He didn't even get past the feasibility study for the bridge. And he's now charged before the court for tampering with that study, illegally occupying it and spending $150-something million for it, when by illegally awarding it to a company that he had an unsolicited bid from. So look at the duplicity of these people. Oh, he's concerned about this might not come in 2025. It will come in 2026 now, but he didn't even get past the feasibility study. They're charged for corrupt practices at the feasibility study level. That is what will come. So he went on to speak about Amila. What is the government doing about Amila now? This is the party that killed Amila Fall. And he's concerned now that we are not doing enough to restart the Amila project fast enough. So he then talks about the airport project too. Can you imagine Patterson talking about this airport project? If there is an impartial investigation, I think he'd go to jail for what took place at the airport. We left a project that said you're building a new terminal building. That was a signed contract. You're pulling down this whole building and you're putting up a new modern structure. That's the project we left. After Patterson's intervention, we then ended up with a rehabilitated structure. A rehabilitated structure. If you have an impartial investigation, you go to jail. But he speaks about this. And he talks about, friends and family. He should be looking at friends and families and the Chinese contractors, maybe for Pato. So, these are some of the things that came out of their press conference. They just, all the government, Bamia School is friends and family. Now, Bamia is being done by hits and jams. I'm not sure that group is friends and family of the PP, but we have a broad camp too, and they will complete the project. But these are the same people who talk about lack of opportunities for Afro-Guyanese and then would run down an Afro-Guyanese company the most if they get a contract. They'd run them down because they don't want Afro-Guyanese to succeed. So this is what you will get from APNO. Then Ramjatan weighed in. He wants to bring back the 2 a.m. curfew. That's why I said warn people. They don't have new ideas. The 2 a.m. curfew never worked. It was a useless thing. Nobody goes out on a Friday night or Saturday night before midnight. This guy, I said at that time, he used to get high before midnight and go home when I was in leader of the opposition. So he thinks that everybody should go home at that time. This is our culture. It's a culture. You know how much business is done and how many people go out on a Friday night or a Saturday night at midnight. They leave home at midnight. These guys are worn out of touch with reality. He wants to shut down everything at 2 a.m. And this is their solution for the accidents on the road. Now, we have to do more. I can understand the need to address that. We have too many fatalities on our road, but a lot of them take place during the day too. Daytime and any hour, and people should bear more consequences for this, and we should do much more. So I'm not saying that we should not do more in that regard. But this old 2 a.m., remember when he wanted to fight crime when we had a spurt in the crime wave, and he said he's going to bring dogs and ponies to fight the crime wave, the same Ramjatan, and an amnesty with guns. The people will bring in their guns and drop it off and give it to him, and that would end the crime wave. He was a hopeless minister at that time, and they have nothing new to offer. The reason I'm telling you all of this is because week by week now, they've done nothing, but they're going to go to all of the projects we're doing now that they would be incapable of conceiving or implementing and say, oh, it's delayed a couple of weeks, something is wrong with it. They would you can't have a party that is reactive, a party that can only criticize, can't run a country. You recall last week I was speaking about a national plan, and this guy, Nigel Hughes, was talking about plan. So this week I thought he would respond by laying out all their plans, because I said they have zero plan and he wanted us to get together and work on a plan. And what were they doing 15 years in government as a political party, and the last 5 years in government? I thought they had a plan. So he should have gone to the press conference and say, here is our plan for everything. They don't have any plan for anything, so they have to go and criticize what we're doing. That's all. You know, you always have some sour person in every home who can't do nothing. They just sit down all day and they can't find it right. So with everything else you do, you wipe the floor, you clean the bedroom, you make up the bed, and then they would say, oh, look, there is a speck of dust on your bed here. You didn't do it well? That's this group there. That's all they do, gripers, complainers, incapable of doing anything. I'm going to just deal with one issue to show you how lack of research causes people to be misled and in this country, and it's basic. So it goes like, if oil prices collapse, Guyana can find itself in a serious debt crisis. And this is peeping Tom. And it goes on to make the point that in the 90s, at that time the external debt was a mere 2.1 billion US dollars. And then it comes on to say, the PPP highlighted this burden as a major campaign issue in 1992 elections, which they subsequently won. Today, however, the situation has taken a paradoxical turn. While the per capita debt has risen to levels even higher than in 1992, the current PPP civic government appears less concerned, choosing instead to focus on favorable metrics. So it sounds smart, but it's nonsense. So first of all, it wasn't a mere $2.1 billion. A mere $2.1 billion. Our economy, the size of our economy at that time, was under 400 million. So it's between, it depends on which agency you look at, but about 360 million US dollars. So just imagine your debt being $2.1 billion, a mere 2.1 billion US dollars, and your economy is, say, 300 odd million dollars. So it is 6 times more than your whole economy. At one stage, it was 9 times more than our economy in those early periods. 9 times more. Check Carl Greenidge's affidavit under the green mining construction. So we can establish that the debt was several times the size of our economy. Today, the debt, so it's a lie that the debt has grown in absolute terms. Our economy is 22 billion US dollars, and our debt, external debt last year was $1.7 billion, less than the 2.1 billion in the 90s. So with our borrowing this year or so, it should get up, say, about $2.1 billion. But our economy is $22 billion. So if you look at per capita GDP, our per capita GDP, so even in absolute terms, if I don't know who wrote this, they should have just done, even absolute terms, it's lower than in the 90s. Although you have an economy that is 60-something times bigger than the 90s. 60-odd times bigger than the 90s. And your capacity to repay. So our per capita debt today is about 2,000, if you look at the 2023 figures, just over 2,000 US dollars. It was 2,500 per person. But our per capita GDP is $20,564 versus the per capita GDP, $2,500 of debt in per capita in the 90s, and a per capita GDP of $300 US. You have to look at this carefully. And also our non-oil revenue this year is greater than the total stock of outstanding debt. So our non-oil revenue alone is more than all of our external debts, leaving out the fact that we have one of the lowest debt service ratio in the world, and our debt to GDP ratio is low. And that's how you look at capacity to repay. So this couldn't be an economist writing this. And secondly, it's nonsensical, pure nonsensical, but it's a whole 2 pages. And it sounds, if someone reads this, they would actually believe this nonsense. That is why I would say, why don't you just allow these people to put their names? So people would see all of these mediocre commentators who are writing all the time, but they're anonymous. They hide behind this so they can talk a lot of nonsense and sound smart behind this nonsense that they put. They don't have any accountability, but they mislead large numbers of people. Because it sounds, if you read the article, it sounds great. It touches all the buzzwords. Debt to GDP ratio, revenue to GDP ratio, but it's nonsense. It's like the guy who Starbuck News in the editorial quoted from the Inter-American Development Bank speaking about short-termism. So I'm going to end there. Thank you.
Mr. Jagdeo, Dennis Shabral, Demarawi. Sir, first of all, can you say what is the status of the CGX license, or whether the government will grant an extension of the appraisal?
The president is out, so I told you that the cabinet engaged on the matter. The questions asked of CGX were the answers given to the questions asked by CGX were not satisfactory to the cabinet. The cabinet is not inclined to grant an extension to the license. However, they will return. They took no definitive position. The discussion took place, and the matter, they've asked some additional information. And so that matter will be concluded at some point in time, but right now, I told you about the inclination of the cabinet. It's not inclined to give any extension, but it wants some additional information.
What's that additional information you're looking at, and why not the inclination to extend?
Because they did not give satisfactory answers to the questions asked, posed by the minister. And that dealt with the ability to finance any future operations and a partner that is of the standing and has the capacity, both financial and otherwise, to implement a project in the future. But those are just two of the questions that were asked of them.
Okay.
That they did not give satisfactory answers.
Has government set itself a deadline by which it will make a definitive
No,
decision?
it's right now they don't have a license. Right now they don't have a license. So there is no pressure on the government to address this matter. The government has already asked them to supply all of the information, the seismic information and everything else that they should deposit with the GGMC on all of their activities offshore.
In the absence of a license, you can extend the period for appraisal. Is that true?
Yes, but so if there was a favorable decision, the mechanism would have been found.
My second question is, can you confirm that you're traveling to the U.S. very soon?
Yes.
And for what reason?
Yeah, I'm traveling to the U.S. for government business and other business.
How soon?
Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night.
Yes.
And will government business include Exim Bank related matters? And as I'm in that point, what's the status of the loan application?
So the latest was that they're hoping to catch a board meeting that it had gone through. It was published for 30 days, and once they had received all the comments for the 30 days, then they would move forward. I don't know really if the 30 days have expired as yet. It may have expired, it may not have expired. So I have to check the details on that. But you can get that from Minister Ashley Singh.
What's the government business you're going on? What's the government business you're going on?
Oh, I can't be telling you that.
Quickly, sir, what stage is government plans to reintroduce a railway system?
So we have studied various alternatives since I was president. We looked at the possibility of a rail link connecting us with Brazil, but mainly for cargo, freight, along with a road, a fiber optic cable, and also transmission main. So that is still going to be studied in the context of the port development connecting with northern Brazil that we had a discussion with Lula on. And then we had looked at another alternative that is between Haslington, Golden Grove on the East Coast to Diamond. That is a possibility because a huge number of people live in this area. Georgetown, going up to Diamond, a significant amount of our population, maybe 350,000 people. So it's a dense concentration. So the possibility of a light railway there. So that we will come back to that, and then we looked at a tram system in the city. So we are still, once you have cheap electricity, then you can go with a tram system to move people around. But that's not on the card right away now, but we still have those plans maybe for future development.
The coastal railway idea is also on the back burner?
No, but this was the area that we studied.
I know, but
right. We are developing now the road links. So at this point in time, there is no coastal railway connecting the entire coast from Parika all the way to maybe Molson Creek at this stage. We were looking at that part, the densely populated areas.
If I can press you, sir, on that, why have you apparently put it in the back burner when the more roads you build, it's the more congested the place gets over a very short period of time?
But also you have to look at people's proclivity. Everyone is owning a vehicle, and in a few years' time, most of our people will own their homes, their own vehicles, etc. Unless you start penalizing the use of vehicles by Norton wants it already removing the subsidy, the $500 subsidy on fuel. So then you may be able to force people to do that. But it's more convenient to use vehicles now. That's why we put it on the back burner. We can't do everything at once. We'd have to we have to study it carefully, and also the demand for it. the demand is a crucial thing. You have to look at who will use it, the convenience of using it, all of these issues.
My penultimate question, sir.
But it is something, when I say back burner, it's not as though we have discounted it totally. It's just we have to keep studying these issues to make sure that at some stage, maybe when we may have to have some public transportation back again when you have congestion in the future, but it's not an immediate thing.
Going back to the 1970s or thereabout, when the government had taken over possession, government had taken control of the education system, a number of schools that had been located in lands owned by churches and other religious organizations had, of course, that still remains. Does government plan at any near point in the future to pay at market value to the churches the value for the lands and take over the lands?
Take over government church lands?
Essentially on which the government schools are still housed, are still located rather.
This has to be, there is no across the board thing. I think this has to be worked out between the particular church and the ministry. This has to be worked out between the particular church and the Ministry of Education. But I can't say across the board that we'll take over church land. In fact, we are trying to minimize the use of church land. But there have been, historically, some schools are already on church land.
Built schools on existing
yes,
church lands.
So that's why I said that. Where on those rare occasions where we did, it would have to be a negotiation between the church and the ministry. They should get together.
As you in a response to an earlier question, is your visit to the United States having anything to do with the recent decision by the Treasury Department against the Mohammeds?
No, nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with the Treasury Department and the Mohammeds.
Dr. Jagdeo, Milton Granum for Oil Now. Other than the low carbon development strategy and other measures already in place to climate-proof Guyana, does the government plan to put any other measures in place to climate-proof Guyana?
So we have to step up our plans for the integrated water management strategy. And we have the draft terms of reference and a draft strategy already. So that is another area that is crucial, where we look at water for navigation, we look at water for drinking purposes, potable water, water for like irrigation. These are the blue economy. So that is offshore, not inland waters. All of these in a combined water strategy, looking at water tables and stuff like that. So that's another area of focus, to have an integrated strategy and management of all of our water resources. Because although we're land of many waters, we have to be careful that you don't have saline intrusion or an overuse of water from the reservoirs, that is the water table. So we have to make sure that we manage that thoroughly. The second area is a focus on biodiversity protection and therefore an expansion of the protected areas, but in a different model. So we are looking now at legislative changes to give the cover for an expanded protected area system, but that will not maybe see the same levels of protection as some of the parks that we have, but could protect crucial areas that are isolated. For example, a watershed, a crucial watershed might be protected. you may allow some types of activities still in the protected area, but protect, say, the rare fish, rare flora and fauna. So we're looking at that too, and that would be another area of focus. So we have looked at the carbon and ecosystem services. We're looking at adaptation. We're now going to expand the look at integrated water management and also biodiversity protection. These are four areas for enhanced focus.
And is any consideration being given to things like climate resilient construction, considering the booming construction industry in Guyana?
The key thing is that given that we're outside of the hurricane zone, our key vulnerability is flooding. And so even in the construction, they talk about raising the homes a bit higher. However, we are developing a capacity to be able to address larger volumes of water faster because the intensity of rainfall has changed. Our storage areas are being reduced because as we widen roads, you have less storage sometimes. Therefore, our capacity to pump the water out, not wait on gravity flow, has to increase. And that's why the 19 pump stations with 39 installed pumps, 40 mobile pumps that we can move around the country quickly in cases where you have intense rainfall in particular regions. Then the 60 new cokers, the Hope-like canals in several regions, all of this would be, I spoke of earlier, not only have an impact on the cultivation areas, but also on dwelling areas like our villages and the city and other areas.
Okay. And you have indicated some time back that talks are underway for the government to sell its certified carbon in a Singapore-based compliance market. Can you update us on how far those talks are?
Well, these are ongoing. These things don't happen overnight. So we're still examining to sell.
Okay, and the last, well, second to last.
No
Is
problem.
Exxon still not positively inclined to purchase Guyana's carbon credits?
No, they're not inclined to purchase it, and I've been critical of this at the last meeting. I don't think they're doing enough in Guyana on the climate side. Also, the Chinese company, Hess has a great deal that we've had with Hess, but the two other co-ventures are not doing enough on the climate.
Okay, and my last question. Some countries have taken the step to regulate the type of fuel they use at their airports. Canada, Germany, and one airlines also embarked to use sustainable aviation fluid to aid in their fight against climate change. Does Guyana plan to implement any new strategies or maybe go down the same road soon?
The key thing is that if you look at some of those countries, it's almost a fraction of their flights are using the so-called sustainable airline fuel. It's not widespread. And those countries you call, they have a larger carbon footprint than countries like Guyana, and significantly larger. So I don't think there is a need for us to do this at this point in time. Thank you. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo, Nasu Williams, Skytree News. Firstly, can you say if there are any developments to recover the money the auditors discovered Exxon spent in the Kaieteur and Kanji blocks?
What? I didn't get that one. You said again?
Can you say if there are any developments in recovering monies Exxon would have spent from the Stabroek block revenue to the works in Kaieteur and Kanji?
So the last time you said that the minister is not doesn't want to answer some of your questions. So he will have a press conference on Wednesday coming, I think the following Wednesday. So all of these routine things that are not policy-based, you can find out there.
Can you update us on when the Petroleum Commission will be in place?
No. I've dealt with that question already. 100 times, yeah.
Finally, sir, we recall your statements that the coalition government sold out our oil patrimony when they signed the lopsided contract with Exxon, which is a form of slavery. And citizens are currently feeling the impact of this slave deal. Do you plan as an ex-president, now vice president, to help to basically free Guyanese from this slave deal that the coalition would have signed us up onto?
What slave? What you said? So I can't,
we recall
can
your
you
statements that the coalition government sold out our patrimony when they signed the lopsided contract with Exxon. The citizens are also at present feeling the impacts of this, air quotes, slave deal. Do you plan?
Who is the quote from the slave bit? Who is the quote from this?
It would have been comments from civil society.
From civil society. Oh, not Glenn Lal.
No, not this time.
All right, okay.
Do you plan as an ex-president?
Because that's precisely what I wanted to get, that I didn't say slave contract. So it came from civil society. Now, we have a consistent position throughout. We have never changed our position in opposition and in government. When the contract was signed, we complained about the lack of transparency. I, in opposition, pointed out that we believe the contract was lopsided, and I listed at least 5 areas where I felt that the government should have done better. I just didn't like this opposition here would just comment generally about things. I listed 5 areas, including the lack of ring fencing, the royalty rate, the share that's going to cost recovery, a number of things. The part about the decommissioning funds, all of these I commented on. These were reasons I said we believe that the contract was lopsided. I was asked whether we will renegotiate the Starbrook contract before the elections. My answer was no. Before the elections. And I outlined then why, as I've done until now. We haven't changed our positions throughout. I could have easily, conveniently done like AFC, who signed the contract now say, yeah, renegotiate, because they just don't have solid positions. I knew we were going to be in government, and I explained why. And I've done so several times, again, and the logic of it, about the need to get the investments now. We've already locked in about $60 billion of investments, 6 projects that will produce, where we'll produce 1.3 to 1.5 million barrels of oil per day. When other countries are struggling now to get any financing for their projects, and on top of that, there's an added worry that net zero and the move to introduce renewable at scale will have these reserves, the reserves that they have already proven, leave them stranded. I've explained all of this, then and now, and why we could not get into a dispute at that stage and slow down the momentum. We're now a party that doesn't explain its decisions and the reasoning behind the decisions. We made it clear. We also said, however, that we're going to do the following thing, that any contract that outside of the Stabroek contract, which was signed in 2016, that would have to comply to new terms or new conditions in a new PSA that we will draft. We said that Exxon, although they were part owners and operators of the Kaichor and Kanchi blocks, that in those two cases, the Stabroek PSA conditions would not apply. They would have to, if they developed the Kanchi project and the Kaichor project, those would have to fall under the conditions of the new PSA. We drafted a new PSA. We moved we reduced the size of the blocks smaller to ensure that there was no need for ring fencing because of large areas. 2, we reduced the cost recovery from 75% to 65%. We increased the corporate tax from 0 to 10%, and we increased the royalty from 2% to 10%. Those are the fiscal terms. We said in the new law that we passed, the Petroleum Activities Bill, that the decommissioning funds must be placed in a separate account and not be kept by the companies. We put that in our new permit, that the last permit for the last project that we approve will have a separate fund created, and the decommissioning funds will all be paid into that and held there. Almost every criticism that we made of the contract in the 2017 period, we have sought to fix through the PSA. On the environmental side, we are even, apart from the insurance and the guarantee, the parent guarantee, we are now passing new legislation to ensure that the full liabilities are borne by, for any spill, are borne by the companies involved, including the cost of cleaning up the spill as well as economic damages. So we have remained consistent throughout. We don't waver all the time. I'm talking about from 2015. We're in opposition. It was easy to be convenient like Trotman and say, oh, we'll renegotiate. We wouldn't renegotiate, etc. We'll support the government to renegotiate. That's all they're saying. And I don't even know what Nigel Hughes is saying, because he's working for Exxon. And all of that, nobody focuses on that. The obscenity of him working for Exxon, and his party is in Parliament now voting on bills that have impact on the management of the sector. And I think all of this big nonsense that Patterson is asking these questions, will Jagdeo supply, why they increase the capacity, all of that information would be provided in the Parliament whenever the question comes up. But it is a cover for Nigel Hughes' obscenity, which is he's on Exxon's payroll. So this fiend level of activism and interest is to give a cover to someone there. Now imagine, and I forgot to make this point, Patterson and Ramjatan are criticizing the chair of the Public Procurement Commission. Now I know Patterson, I know Ramjatan, and I know of the chair of the PPC. And the entire AFC combined, all their leaders, Cathy Hughes, Ramjatan, Nigel Hughes, Patterson, and all the others, if you combine their integrity, they can't come up to half of the chair's integrity who is chairing the chair of the PPC. They have absolutely no integrity. They're complaining that she's misinterpreting her role. And it's so obscene that they have an executive member of their party who sits on the PPC. How can you get a member? She must be leaking all the information that goes to the leadership of the AFC. She's an executive member and sits on the PPC, and they talk about impartiality. They couldn't find a word. The media is hopeless sometimes. They don't ask about this. How come you talk about the chair and you have a member of your party leadership who sits on the PPC now? And so this is the sort of thing. We never change our position. They change their position every week. It's a new position they have. We've made it clear. It's consistent because we look at the long run. We look at the long run. We made it, everything we said we have done, we will do, we are doing in our manifesto. And we're taking this industry seriously. You think we could operate like Glenn Lal or one of the others? By the way, I saw something last week. So I called Edge Hill and I said, don't be too harsh, because this gentleman was just pointing out what's happening to the Parika Road. So it was a video done by an individual saying, I'm walking down the Parika Road and this road was fixed 5 times in the last several years, and look at the state of the road. So I didn't know who the individual, I thought was a regular citizen. So I said, you have a duty as minister to look at this if it's true, and let's get down and sort it out. So Edgel called me and he said, oh, that's not true. The road was fixed a long time back and the region patched the road up a bit. And we've already awarded in any case for the contract for the road to redo the entire road at Parika. So then I realized that it was another PPP hater, Gina Rahman, an old scamp, baby, and guess who is circulating it? Glenn Lal. And it's a narrow group. It's the TIGI, it's the Gina Rahman, it is the GHRA. It's the same group of fossils who every week, I thought it was a genuine thing. I'm responding to it in a genuine manner and didn't know that this guy was lying. He's a politician because the way he spoke on the video was believable. Oh, the road was done 10 times. That is what they do all the time, mislead people every single day. So knowing that coming from, and you would see it from the Kaichor News too. Anyhow, that wasn't the newspaper. That was in one of his TikTok, I think, TikTok videos. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So look out for this. All of they'll just come out of their woodwork now, one by one. Yes.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo, Selena Natu with Kaichor News. Has the Central Committee or Executive Committee of the PPP discussed the situation in Gaza? And if so, what is the party's position and how does it differ from the government's stance? So,
both the party and the government, we believe what's happening in Gaza is a genocide unfolding. We share the views of many countries in the world that this is that this is genocide, and we support the recent ruling of the ICJ. And we believe that when South Africa's substantive case is heard, that they will conclude that what was taking place in Gaza was genocide. It may be too late because of what's happening to the people there. So you can't get any stronger than that. Secondly, we have called for an end to the war. Well, it's more like it's not so much of a war, it's a one-sided affair, the bombardment, the killing of innocent people, the starving of innocent people in Gaza. And we have also called for a two-state solution. We believe that the people of Israel, that they have a right to live in a country called Israel, in peace and with security of their borders, and we believe that the people of the Palestinian people, they too have a right to an independent state and can live in a dignified way in their own country in peace and security. And that's why we have always been proponents of the two-state solution. We have always supported all the UN resolutions calling for the two-state solution. So that is our position.
Okay, another question. Regarding the current situation, as you said, there is mass genocide going on, and several governments have since cut ties with Israel due to this. Does the Guyanese government intend to follow suit?
Yeah, you would find that few governments have done that, and including many Arab states have not done this. So I think it's something that the government will have to consider, but I don't see it on the card now.
Dr. Jagdeo, Mikhail Rodriguez for Daybreak News. Just for clarity, you were asked about your visit to America, upcoming visit, and you're unable to give the details of what that visit would be. Given the manipulation of the news media in this country and the importance of the role you play in the development of this country, just for clarity, is it government's business or political business, and does it have to do with the development of Guyana? Simple. Does it have to do with development in general?
The development of Guyana. That's it.
Government business or political business?
Government business.
Roger that.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Vice President Kimal King for Oil Now. Could you talk about the model that you're exploring for the deep water port that the government wants to pursue?
So there are several proposals now that we have received, and these would all have to be stacked against one another, and we'd have to assess which is the best proposal, and whether the proposed developers have the expertise to implement the project, and they have the financial capacity to do so. So there are several proposals there that we have received over time, and these are all being examined. The developer, our own view, based on what we have found for the past 3 years, meeting with hundreds of people and all sorts of studies, that we believe that the best model should be a causeway model going out right into the deep that would allow the largest vessels in the world to come here. And that would be, in the long run, the most sustainable thing to do, because you'd avoid a lot of the dredging costs and everything else. So it might be a bit more costly at the beginning, but the operating costs would plunge significantly, and it would also allow us to bring in the largest vessel in the world. So we are inclined to go down that route, but of course if a developer comes up with a model that is sustainable, that could be done in a different way, we're open to that.
Okay, I'm trying to get an understanding of what specifically the government hopes to achieve with this port, and therefore, what lens are you evaluating proposals through? As well as just one more, what do you see as like a cost range for the port?
I don't want to venture that because this has to be an integrated project. It has to be the port, a road to northern Brazil, a possibility of maybe a transmission main, maybe the sale of electricity, if we have large quantities of electricity from the project that we're hoping to develop next, which is the gas project. So it's an integrated project. It will part of the revenue stream to make this project sustainable has to be the integration with Brazil and the business in and out of Brazil. Because on its own, we may not be able to generate enough of a revenue stream to pay back the capital cost and to give a state of a decent rate of return to the equity investor. So that is why that revenue stream, which will come from goods going into Brazil, and that's a use of the port for goods going into Brazil and goods coming out of Brazil, will help to justify this cost. Now, a port of that nature will seriously make our goods that we export, whatever we export, more competitive. The cost of freight out of Guyana is enormous, and sometimes it would affect everything, including our bauxite. And if we can ship bulk, the big ships can come in. You can cut the cost of freight by maybe 60%, which is a huge benefit to making your product more globally competitive. And then the import cost too, for containers coming here. If you have a huge vessel coming in here, you can significantly lower the cost of containers coming here. So we're thinking from this port too, if we have a port of that nature, instead of our goods going to Jamaica and staying there for sometimes 2 months to be transshipped to Guyana, and then some going to Trinidad, the containers, and coming here in smaller vessels. They can come directly here, and we could become a hub, maybe in a free trade area, a zone, to re-export the goods into the Caribbean, Suriname, Brazil, and probably even further out into other countries, so that we become it will become a major growth hub. We're looking at different growth hubs, and one of it was agriculture. So agriculture is a major growth hub of the future, and if you look at I don't want to outline all of the strategy, but it's a major it's reorienting agriculture to focus on higher levels of productivity and greater levels of global competitiveness, so it's more sustainable and more value added to the products. So that's the macro objectives, and it will happen in various sectors. It's corn, it's soya, it's dairy, a number of other things that we are doing there. It's growing the large number of pigs, the bacon, and the bacon and sausages for export, all of that. On tourism, we believe that could become a major growth hub too. With the new hotels here in Georgetown, with eco lodges, and with our assets, we can package that as a major growth hub of the future. The oil and gas industry could become a major, well, it's already a major growth hub. The next one is the connection to Brazil through the deepwater port will be major in the future. ICT, these are, I don't want to spend all this time talking about this, but this is what we've been planning a long time. You wouldn't hear APNO or AFC talk about this and how the growth hubs of the future will create new income for our people. The new income, that's why we think that in another maybe 5 years or so, we'll be like we'd have to get some serious labor from abroad because we don't have enough of our people who hopefully would have been employed and getting better jobs and stuff like that, that they would we'd have to bring in more people for the plans we have.
Thank you. And given the comments you've made about CGX and the possibility that their request may be denied, what in that case would happen to the port that they're constructing in Berbice? Would it just be stranded?
Well, the thing is that we have had some initial discussions with them on that. And so we'd have to find a way forward on that.
Okay. Do you see the government's capital budget expanding next year? When you think about the projects government wants to invest in next year, I'm trying to get an understanding of how the capital budget will evolve.
I think it's a little premature. So what will happen in the initial years, you would see a massive growth in the capital budget, not the recurrent budget. A lot of oil-producing countries make the mistake where they grow their recurrent budget. And that is why if prices fall, they're stuck with the high costs and the loss of welfare. We have studied this carefully over the years, and that is why we are not making the mistakes that they're making. But at some point in time, when it would fall off steeply, and that's when we can start spending a bit more on the recurrent area. So more on wages for our teachers, our police, our nurses, public sector, more on our pensioners, etc. Because when you build the bridge across the Demerara River, it's built. In the future years, that comes out your budget. When the gas to energy project is built, it comes off your budget. When the road, when the 4-lane is built to Mahaika, it comes off your budget. And so these are big items that we are carrying now that will come off of our budget in the future, that will give us a bit more room to focus more on welfare and people's benefits and other things. But right now we need them. We need stable, cheap power. So we are making the investments now, but at some stage you would see a peaking of the capital expenditure and then a steep decline once the big projects come off. Like we have to fix our transmission mains now across this country to have a modern grid. The modern grid would be with fiber optic cable on these lines, so you can know when a blackout takes place in an individual home. You can remotely cut off a meter. You can do all sorts of things in a modern grid. And so that will take some money to fix, but you can't modernize this country without modernizing the grid. When we start getting major factories and massive number of hotels and stuff like that, the demand for power will skyrocket. You can't have blackouts all the time. If we don't focus on that today, the other side criticizes, but they don't focus on anything. They don't want us to even spend on it. They're saying we're spending too much on infrastructure. But they want reliable power, but we mustn't invest in the power plant. But you want reliable power. We mustn't invest in the grid, but they want reliable power.
See your capital budget expanding. I understand your explanation.
Because it depends when we go through our PSIP. So right now, towards the end of the year, we'll go through with our PSIP. So we'd see how much of the existing year projects have to roll into next year. So what if we overspend this year? For example, a project moves forward faster than we had anticipated. That means we will overspend this year, but next year we'll spend less on it because it's completed earlier. If a project is delayed, it means that some of the expenditure from this year would roll into next year. So that means we'd have a higher rollover budget. So a lot of these things have to be determined when you're preparing in the last few months of the year when you're looking at the budget.
Okay, finally, I wanted to talk about, the offshore blocks. Recently, you had the request from Repsol to get a renewed Kanuku license, which the government hasn't been definitive in giving that. Then you have CGX now with its license at an end. And over the next few years, going up to 2026, a lot of the current blocks are set to their license period expire. And
Yeah, so Exxon has to, before the end of the year, give up 20% of its holding. So all of these would be with the government. And it's not going anywhere. There's no rush to do anything at this stage where we'd have to lower standards significantly so that you can get any interest in it. We believe that we have high quality assets and that once we complete, that's why we decided to take the route of doing seismic studies now on these offshore blocks. And then once we are fortified with the seismic studies, we believe we'll get better quality bids at the auctions. So we are not in any sprint. We're not in any sprint to give out all of the remaining blocks. And we made it clear that any block given out in future would have to be done through an auction or directly, but only if it involves another state partner.
why I talked about those blocks is because you did talk about, the fact that we have the energy transition, and so there is a timer, and you want to keep the drilling momentum and stuff like that. So that's why I posed.
Yeah, sure.
These blocks are going to expire, and if you could also give an update on the block awards to those, the Exxon
No
Led Group
progress
and the Total Led
whatsoever.
Group.
And when Vikram Bharat has his press conference, then you can ask him for details on every one of those. So you can go through each of those separately. But we need to make sure that we don't have, we believe the lack of seismic will not, we tested the market, first of all, without seismic, and you saw what the market yielded. So we've reconsidered it, and we now are going the route of doing seismic, so we can have better quality offers. We believe that that may even be speedier, and you'd still have work ongoing, although not work by an operator, work by the company that wins the bid to do the seismic. They would have work going on onshore, which would have had to be done in any case.
Hi, good afternoon, Dr.
Good
Jagdeo.
afternoon.
Schorfenberger of Kiteshore. Several months has passed since the 5 top-ranking officers were killed in a helicopter crash. In January, we heard that a black box was sent abroad. Can you tell us about the status of the investigation?
I have not followed that. You should ask the chief of staff for that.
A few weeks back, you said that the central bank...
Or
has a-
civil aviation.
Civil
I think
aviation.
civil aviation might be the best agency. They're tasked with dealing with that.
Yeah, Chief. A few weeks back, you said that the central bank intervened in the local dollar market, but there's still some concerns about the availability of the dollar and the price that is available. Some people saying it's reaching 225 for one. Can you see the government will make any intervention again soon? Or
I made it clear that whenever the government feels that there's a need to, we have the capacity to intervene in the market, and we will do so whenever there is a need. Sometimes you have a lot of mismatch on currency too. So although the bank transfer rate might be lower when people have to buy cash, because the central bank often doesn't deal with cash. So there's a shortage of cash in the market. So maybe we'd have to look at that. And I think what has happened too, with more of the gold being sold now to the gold board, a number of people were exporting the gold and selling the currency back in the market. So more and more the gold is being sold to the gold board now, as we tighten up with the investigations we had with the Chinese ring that was smuggling gold, and some other investigations we've had, that you would have more of the gold being sold to the gold board. Now, when the gold board sells the gold, the foreign currency will go to the central bank. It will not go into the market directly. So the central bank now needs to put more of those resources back into the market that would have gone into the market if you had more private exporters of the gold. So I think that might be one of the issues that's taking place now. But I've not really looked in great detail at the market, so I'd have a look at that.
Thirdly, you have spoken in last press conference of the things that you've done for the oil sector, which is commendable. But in light of this, I want to ask, when will the Petroleum Commission be put in place?
I spoke about that already. I spoke about this in the past. It's like the same thing. I saw the point about interest. And last week, I knew you were going to put the headline, Jagdeo doesn't know the interest rate that Exxon is charging. Now, how many times do we have to give the same explanation? So, on the interest matter, do you recall what we said? Do you recall that no interest is charged to the cost bank? There's zero interest charged to the cost bank. That the company has been funding its operation from equity and from money that it does not repatriate to the parent, its earning that it doesn't repatriate to its parent company. So although the PSA provides for interest to be charged to the cost bank, in this case, they are funding their operations basically from two sources. So there is no interest charged to the cost bank. We explained that 100 times. So why would Kaichor News not understand that? What interest? And we made it clear that even when they lease from, like the FPSOs, they lease the FPSOs. So the FPSOs, the companies that build the FPSOs may borrow, but their interest on their loan to build the FPSO is reflected in the leasing costs until the equipment is fully paid for, and then it gets transferred to the company, the local company. So how many times do we explain this? On the Petroleum Commission, I've explained that there's no magic with a Petroleum Commission. You think under the PNC, with their proclivity to intervene and subjugate technical bodies, if they could subjugate a GCOM or the Army, I spoke of that earlier. You think a petroleum commission, they would put a Vincent Henry on the petroleum commission. A Vincent Henry or Vincent Adams. He is a great technical man, although he's a politician. Like how they put their executive member on the PPC and then say, oh, it acts independently. It's a sham. It's a sham. They would have intervened there. They have no decent, there's no magic. We have given our agencies the tool to manage the sector and better. And that is why we have a petroleum activities bill that replaces the one from 1986. For Christ's sake, you know what it took to get that in place? The hard work that it took to get that in place. They could have done it in the 5 years they're there. They did nothing. We did it in a record time. And now we've expanded its scope to modern law now from 1986. That's what they had for the 5 years they've been in office. That's what they were using. You know what I took? Look at the tools available there. The same thing about decommissioning costs. It's now reflected on how it has to be accounted for in that act. When I went to Ghana, there people said, a lot of people said it's too ambitious to get the local content law. We couldn't move it for years. People were opposed to it. We passed it. Look at the impact it has had on our people and the building industry here and everything else. And Guyanese getting jobs now. Look at that. That's what they're not focused on. They would never want to focus on, oh, why isn't the PPP passing a petroleum commission? As though if we pass a petroleum commission tomorrow and put, let me see who, Kwame McCoy to head the petroleum commission, or another member of the executive of the party, so like what they're doing on the AFC. They'd put Vincent Adams to head the EPA. And he was the same one who signed off on all these mediocre environmental permits, and today he has a lot to speak about. So they'll put somebody like that. What do you think will happen? It's the same commission, same political. Would Kaichor then stop criticizing us? The answer would be no. There's nothing magical about this. There's nothing magical. So I hope I gave you my answers again. This is the last time I'm coming back to those two questions.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Finally, you had responded to my colleague's question, and I can recall that a period back you said that you would have made an interview public where you said that your government will not renegotiate.
I can get the clips from my press conference. I will get it. It's a clip from my press conferences.
Okay.
I can get that. Yeah. In the past, go and research it. Research it. Two, you should research. You can find all these things. If you research Glenlal, you would find some things you don't want to find out about. But that's what media people should do. All right, go ahead. Yeah. Thank you very much.